This is the nature of everything. Don't stay stuck.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Nature of Everything. I'm Bo.
And I'm Clint. And today we're stepping into something that we've kind of been messing around with all week.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for 2 weeks. But,
Yeah.
this week we were listening to Gabor Maté, and he was talking about the dark side of people pleasing. And it wasn't fluffy, and it wasn't motivational. It was a little uncomfortable, but I felt like it kind of related to some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Absolutely, because he's breaking down how being too nice isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's just simply survival. Sometimes it's something that you've learned early because if you didn't learn it early, it wouldn't have kept you safe, maybe.
Yeah, and that hits. Because, we've been talking a lot lately about friction and how growth requires tension and how you don't get direction without a little resistance.
But what if the reason people avoid friction isn't out of laziness, or it's not out of intentionally trying to get away from these things? What if it's because of how you've been wired to deal with that?
Yeah. I mean, what if being agreeable or being, easy, being the one who keeps the peace, what if it's not maturity? What if it is compliance?
Yeah, and it's like some weird obligated compliance. Not even consciously so, but it's the kind that you have learned as a child, and it's continued to be practiced and developed. Like, it got you acceptance and it got you love, or in a way maybe it didn't get you those things, but it made you feel as though you kept from losing love or acceptance along the way.
This video kind of talked about how trauma disconnects us from our gut and how your body can say no, but your mouth still says yes. And I'm no psychologist, but the guy's just really interesting. And I thought it was, worth kind of looking into.
Absolutely, and mainly because it really lines up with the stuff that we've been circling around. If friction is required for that real intentional living that we're seeking, and you've built your whole identity around like eliminating that friction, well, hell, how intentional can you actually be if that's the case?
Yeah. I mean, I think you posed that question on Tuesday, and it was like, wow, that's a deep question. So
Mhm.
today, that's what we're going to unpack where it starts and why it sticks and what responsibility looks like now that you know that.
Indeed, this is the nature of everything, and today we're talking about the cult of compliance.
So when I first heard Mate talk, and look, I think I've heard a handful of people say the gentleman's name, Gabor Maté. Gabor. You're gonna find him. But when I first heard him talk about people, he talked about people pleasing as survival. I didn't think like, oh yeah, that's me. I thought, like, no, I'm just easygoing. I mean,
Mhm.
if people that know me personally were to give a characteristic of me, they would use that term. Like, he's just
Sure.
laid back.
Yep,
And
laid
I've
back.
always told myself that I'm adaptable, that I can read a room, and I think I can. And I've told myself, I don't have to win every argument. I don't need to make everything about me. And for a really long time, that felt really healthy and it felt really mature.
Yeah, well, and absolutely 100% the same. I think I would be described the same way, especially in a social manner. Maybe not always professionally, but it feels like you're adulting when you are, when you're the easygoing, laid back, chill, but it does. Like it's there. Like you have intentionally not let it ruffle your feathers, or it hadn't you don't show an outward sign of whether it's embarrassment or being pissed off or hurt your feelings or whatever it is. Staying in this chill kind of thing makes it feel stable somehow though.
Yeah. If I'm honest, there have been moments where I wasn't being adaptable and I wasn't being laid back. I was disappearing. I
Hmm.
would
Hmm.
feel something, some kind of disagreement or discomfort or some boundary. And instead of saying it, I would just kind of smooth it over and just sort of be like, well, I'm laid back, make a joke, change the
Hmm.
subject. In the moment, it felt efficient. It felt like I was keeping things moving. Like, why would I blow this up? But then later, you might feel a little bit of resentment, or you
Hmm.
just keep replaying it in your mind. I mean, I think that's kind of a key.
The I should have said this. If I'd have just thought about it, like
I
this would have
know
been.
I'm so smart when I go back and look at it.
I know, but I mean, to your point, like that is the part I think that gets sort of passed over too often is that there is a cost to that, and it does show up later. There is a resentment piece or an exhaustion piece, or there is something that you continue to play through that does cost you something.
Because you think you've avoided conflict, but really what you did was, I think you absorbed it.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
doesn't just disappear. It moves to the inside. I didn't experience it as fear. I really did experience it as sort of being low maintenance or just trying to like be chill. But if I really dig deeper, some of that wiring, it started early when it felt safer to be agreeable than to be honest. And I don't
Hmm.
say that dramatically, but I mean I'm being truthful. You know, we at some point we learn what gets us approval and we learn what doesn't and we kind of adjust.
Yeah, we adjust, but I mean, I think that's important to look at and say we adjust it. And what you said was you absorb the conflict, and I mean that's really the damaging part is because you're not sharing whatever that conflict is that you're having interpersonally with someone else. You are absorbing the entirety of it when you're doing that whole laid back it doesn't bother me thing. Like you being the constant adjustment becomes sort of a habitual personality. That becomes your practice. That becomes your nature of absorbing all that conflict. And I don't think that's healthy.
No, it's scary. I
Hmm.
mean, there's no strategy in that. It's just weird. It starts to feel like you. You know, I'm just laid back. You know, I'm cool. It's cool. And I think a lot of people listening probably feel the same way and can recognize the same stuff. Not some big traumatic headline, you know, but just all those small moments, how they stack up. You override that feeling and you just keep it smooth, but you absorb it.
If we beat up on it a little further, like we've mentioned there's a cost to it. So if we're talking about the cost to it, and I'm not talking about the explosive, like huge dynamic fight things every time you know, you say yes to something when you really didn't want to, and you're, you know, now you're kind of regretting that, and you knew it up front. I'm talking about, you know, the things, it's not dramatic. Like you said, most of the time, nothing dramatic happens at all. You just go to the thing, or you talk through some conversation that you don't care anything about and you don't want to be in, but you smooth it over, you take it on the chin again, and you laugh it off because if you decide to conflict with it, now you're the asshole that started the conflict, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, on the outside, that looks like everything's fine because there was no friction, as you were talking about. There's no conflict. But we absolutely know that inside, something is shifting, something is affecting us. And generally it is subtle. And it's not some big explosion. But it's exhausting. It does feel like fatigue. It does feel like conflict. And there's probably plenty of irritability that goes along with it. There's probably plenty of stress that you're feeling.
Yeah, I think you got to name it like we talk about name it, but maybe
Mhm,
you got to name it twice. I'm feeling
mhm,
irritable.
mhm,
Why? You know, I
mm.
mean,
Yeah.
because it's not like you walk away from some little irritability thing or whatever you kind of just smooth it over. You don't walk away thinking something dramatic like, you know, I betrayed myself again. You know, you just walk away thinking like, oh, you know, I'm tired. I'm tired of that.
I will
And,
say this though, it would be much cooler if you said it in those words, in that tone to yourself when I betrayed myself and get really
and
dramatic about it. I think that would actually help if you
That
did
would kind
that.
of be a way to name it. Like if you did do
That's your
that, like
trigger.
I have betrayed myself again. But I mean, if
Exactly.
you're honest, like you weren't tired before the conversation, you weren't irritable,
Mm,
you know, like
mhm.
you do feel that way. It would be a good idea to acknowledge it.
Sure, because if you don't and you continue to smooth it over and over and over, and you override and you compartmentalize and pack away what you're actually feeling, you don't become more peaceful. You don't become
Mm-mm.
more comfortable in your own skin. You do become resentful, and not loud, explosive, you know, asshole resentful necessarily, but this quiet, probably more damaging, more destructive, quiet resentment.
Yeah, and look, quiet resentment, I mean, it's dangerous, you know, because it hides behind labels like maturity or patience, you
Mhm.
know. We're like,
Mhm.
well, I'm going to be the bigger person. You know, honestly, you're kind of not, you know, because you know you're off. You know you're not
Mhm.
being honest.
Yeah, and that lack of honesty about it, that that offness, you wanna blame them, but it's not about them. It's
Mm-mm.
about knowing that you weren't facing up to you and what you were actually experiencing. And that's the piece of this that, the stuff that Mate's talking about. It's not just that trauma like disconnects you or disassociates you from other people. It actually disconnects you from yourself and what you know to be your own signals and your own triggers of what's going on. Like your body's telling you this doesn't feel right. And you basically look at yourself and go, well, you know what? We don't have time for that shit right now. We're just gonna let it go past us and we'll get it next time. We'll deal with it now. I won't let this happen again. And that's not true.
Yeah, and look, everybody knows, in a relationship when you really want to have a good fight, and you're just like,
Mm,
well, but now is not a good time because fill in the
hmm.
blank, it's never a good
That's right.
time, right?
That's
I
right.
mean, in any relationship, but obviously romantic relationships, we can all appreciate that there's never a good time for a fight.
No.
I mean, but the deal is like, if you stop ignoring the voice that says, hey, push back, don't be afraid of a little bit of friction. Like if you ignore that voice, you will just kind of stop hearing it. And
Yeah.
then you're not avoiding friction anymore. You're totally lost clarity.
Sure. You're losing clarity of yourself and what you want and what you want to be intentional about. Like, and man, clarity, like you're talking about, that really is everything. Like that's the big door prize to everything that you're wanting, because you can't confirm something that you refuse to look at, to feel, to experience. And you can't take ownership in something that you won't admit to. And also, you can't be intentional if you're disassociated from what the truth is. So all of those things lead to that clarity that you're talking about. And if you completely ignore what the signals and pieces are to be clear, man, that's just a foolish move.
And that cost is not just stress or a little resentment or little irritability. That's like total identity drift. It's slowly
Hmm.
becoming a version of yourself that everybody appreciates, but you don't recognize.
Yeah, don't even look right in the mirror at that point. So let me ask it this way. At what point this level of niceness and this level of, go with the flow kind of thing, at what point does that become dishonest? And I'm not talking about like not rude, not harsh, but when does it become dishonest?
Hmm.
Because if we know if I'm smiling while I'm internally just biting nails and being pissed off, if I'm agreeing just to avoid whatever this temporary moment of tension or friction or conflict's going to be, if I'm absolutely just giving in and saying yes to something while my gut's telling me like this is a bad call, that's not kindness. Like that really is like that's dishonesty. And
Mm.
like,
That's
it's
heavy.
it's concealment, right? I mean, that you're just covering up what's true.
It is, and I think that's where people get nervous, because we think like we're doing a service to the world. It's really some form of personal martyrdom. It's like, well, I'm going
Mhm,
to take this one, and it's like, God, that's just not a good idea. But I mean, what you're saying is that beyond the psychology of like what you're doing to yourself, it is just dishonest. It's not
it
real,
is.
because I mean,
Mhm,
Brene Brown, she always says like, clear is kind. Jess always says that line, and it sticks with me
mhm,
because it sort of held up a mirror to me to say that maybe I'm not clear all the time.
yeah,
Like that's true about me. I know this about myself. That laid back, but that didn't keep me from slowly sort of chipping away at like, well, this was the easier path. Try to be vague because that's kind, or we try to be agreeable because we're laid back or quiet or whatever. I don't know. Clear really does feel risky to some of us.
I do completely agree, and you're exactly right, because that lack of clarity when you're being well, now it sounds kind of shady too if you're not being clear and you're kind of
It
dancing
does.
around the thing. Yeah, I mean that can bring up a whole lot of trust stuff as well, and that's not your intentionality. You're trying not to be hurtful by giving vague, sort of references or vague descriptions to where you're not saying this is what I'm taking from you and this bothers me to this degree and why. You don't want to do that because you feel as though you're being protective. And you're being protective in multiple ways. One, I think you're protecting yourself mainly from the discomfort of saying something that may be taken offensively. What you may have to say may be very uncomfortable for the other person to hear. And so you're being protective of yourself. And I think you're also protecting whatever this relationship from the conflict, from the tension, from the bite of whatever the truth of how you feel may be. So unfortunately, like, you're protecting a lie as well. Like you're shielding this lack of truth from being seen, because I mean you're holding it in because the other person thinks they're interacting with how you actually feel. They think that they are interacting with your truth, and if you're not placing it out there, then you're holding back the truth that they are thinking they are in conflict with. And so
That's
you're not being
crazy.
honest.
I mean, that
So
is
they're not
so
they're not dealing with the
real,
real you. Yeah, they're not dealing with the real you.
but they think they are. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's what's so hard. It's terrible. And you know what? Even for the small stuff, I mean, I think that people can sense that. Even if you
Hmm.
sell it, even if you're a
Hmm.
really good liar, like I think that
Sure.
people can sense that. You think, like, we all want to experience love and we want acceptance and all this, but it's John Lynch wrote a book called True Face, and he talks about when we
Hmm.
wear the mask, we can't receive love. Only our mask receives the love. And
That's
this
right.
is really
Mhm.
kind of the same idea, right? If I never actually say what I feel, then you never actually know me. And sometimes we
Yeah.
do it over the stupidest stuff because of this habit that we make. It gets down to
Sure.
where we're laid back and we're cool, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, do you want some pineapple on your pizza? And you're like, sure, why not? But you hate pineapple. I mean, it's the smallest stuff sometimes. And then that resentment, it just grows and it grows in silence. Just a bad pattern.
It's the damn pineapple on pizza, and it
Yes.
should piss you off if you don't put pineapple on my pizza. I will say that luckily I won't stand for that.
This has
I'm not
caused
doing it.
more conflict in the world.
But
Pineapple on pizza
it
is a
is.
hot topic, brother.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, now we get to the exposure piece of this. And you're right, though. Like, to do that, it does look generous. It has that outward appearance of you're generous enough to just, and I'm not saying you can't go along with just stuff that doesn't matter to you, but sometimes you're dressing up the wrong thing with this. Because if you think in terms of, if I stay agreeable, then I stay safe. Well, then we already know that your brain, the chemistry of your brain wants to keep you from discomfort, and it wants to keep you like, quote unquote, safe. But the problem with it is that that level of safe, it may not represent your integrity. Let's put it that way. Like, staying safe may not actually represent your integrity of being truthful with the person that you're engaged with, that expects to deal with the real you and your real thoughts and your real feelings. So if you're hiding that, like, you're hiding an integrity piece to this.
Yeah, and look, coin is all about integrity. To confirm
Mhm.
it, to be real, like just real honest with yourself, to take ownership of it and realize that the buck stops with you. You're the one with the
Mhm.
agency affecting the change, and to be intentional about the steps that you're going to take to make that change. I mean, like, it's all heavy on integrity.
All right, so with that, let's consider this then. And this may ruffle some feathers. This may not feel good. I'm gonna say that there's a chance that if everyone blanket just likes you, is there a chance that maybe you're not being honest? And I'm not saying that you're a fake person. I'm just saying, like, are you being overly filtered so that people aren't actually seeing the real you?
All right, so quick pause before we keep going. If this conversation is hitting somewhere real for you and you're realizing that there are gaps in your life that you haven't named yet, that's exactly why we wrote a book.
Absolutely. Coin. Confirm it, own it, be intentional, and change the nature of everything in your life. It's not hype. It's not fluff. It's a framework we've been using in our own lives for years.
Yeah, and if you want to go deeper than this podcast, if you want something that can actually be something that you can work through, head to coinyourlife.com and grab the book.
Also, we're building a community Not a fan club, not a weird guru thing, just a space for people who are absolutely serious about closing gaps and living intentionally.
And so if that sounds like something that you would want to be a part of, go to coinyourlife.com/community and sign up for more information. No pressure at all, just some possibility.
All right, let's get back to it.
Yeah, because real clarity creates friction. It just does. Like, you're not going to like everything. You have preferences, convictions, or boundaries. Like, someone is going to feel it. They should.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you never disappoint anyone, if you're never the person that creates tension, and if you're always the most agreeable person in the room, well, you're a freaking unicorn, or I think you're probably withholding something.
Yeah, and don't forget, withholding doesn't look dramatic. It looks like smoothing something over. It's fine. It's fine. It's always fine.
That's it. I said it's fine. I said it's fine.
It looks like not bringing it up.
Yeah, so that's the button that I want to push on. That's the thing that I want to like pester right now, is that if you're always liked, then you may indeed be managing your perception of you, the optics you're doing really good with. But I want to make sure that we're being real cautious about whether or not we are living our convictions and living our realities. Because if you're never misunderstood, then maybe you're not really saying anything, because maybe you're not saying anything that has a whole lot of substance to it. If you never lose anyone, if you never piss anybody off, if there's nobody that ever wants to just like wring your neck, then are you sure that you're not just abandoning yourself before anything could ever be real?
Look, I really want you to stop talking, because I mean that really
just shut your mouth. Just shut
that
your mouth.
really stings. I mean, like, I am like, this is a struggle for me. I do pride myself on being laid back, and I don't want to think of myself as being self-abandoning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to think that I override my gut, just to keep the peace. It's tough. We all at some point choose acceptance over our own congruence. But that congruence, that alignment, I mean, that's where our real power lives. I'm starting to get really convicted that I want to go out there and rub some friction and, like screw some shit up. Everybody's going to be like, wow, who's this guy?
Well, and to that, I'm not saying that, and maybe you are, and by all means, go do it, because I want to hear the story. But I'm not.
You'll hear it
It's
on the
not Fight
news,
Club.
brother.
Yeah, I hear it. But I'm not saying it's Fight Club. I'm not saying that you have to go start a fight with a random stranger in order to feel this friction and find a growth. But I also don't want there to be confusion that always being agreeable is somehow your sort of zen spot. Like there's
Right.
going to be plenty of stuff that just doesn't bother you, and you're very chill and very zen about it, and it doesn't rub you the wrong way, and
Yeah,
that's
it
that's
really isn't
perfectly
looking for
fine.
trouble. I mean, that's not what the
Yeah,
point of
yeah,
this is.
absolutely. And this is not a charge to be conflictual simply
Right.
because you've always been laid back, and that is this is about if you're being laid back and you're chasing yourself away from any of the conflict because you somehow believe that being overly agreeable is in your best interest. I just don't think
Yeah.
it always is, because it does build that resentment, and you do know it. Deep down you actually do know that you've swallowed it down, and you've agreed faster, you've acquiesced to whatever it is truly faster than you meant to. Then later you're battling with it's like nobody understands how I really feel, and you feel invisible. Guess what? That isn't necessarily done to you. This feeling isn't dismissal, or the fact that you don't feel seen. That's not necessarily imposed on you. That hadn't been done to you. I think I put myself in that spot. Like I chose that spot for me.
Yeah. And look, I think this is where we need to bring Maté back into the conversation, because he's so helpful and
Right.
therapeutic and smart. Because when he
Mhm.
talks about this people pleasing, he's not shaming it at all. He's just
Mhm.
explaining
Mhm.
it. He talks about how early on, as children, we make unconscious calculations. I'm not smart enough to talk on this, but he is, and it just really lets you know that you shouldn't beat yourself up about it. It's just a part of all
Mhm.
of our lives.
Yeah. kids don't sit around thinking, you know what, today I feel as though I'm being, really amazing at developing a compliance strategy. Like I don't think they're doing that. I think for most kids growing up, attachment wins like almost every time. Like they want to belong to something, and conflict, constantly runs the risk of being on the outside, not necessarily on the inside. And so I don't think that kiddos are thinking about the deeper meaning of the strategic get along. They're not.
Coin for
They're just
kids.
wanting exactly. I do think they understand the notion of what keeps me connected, what keeps me attached to something that feels safe and good.
So, if speaking up creates tension, if having an opinion, creates rejection, or if expressing your anger, if that creates some distance, you adapt. You a lot of times as that kid, you might become agreeable, or you might become easier. You might decide to become low maintenance. It makes sense because it worked, right? But it just happens a little
Well,
bit at
yeah.
a time.
Well, but that's the part that sucks about this is that, sort of in the moment, yeah, I mean, it worked. In that split second, it kept you feeling safe and it kept you feeling loved and it kept you feeling inside the circle for that simple little second.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting here is that all those things could be helpful to a child, to keep a child safe, but for an adult, I mean that kind of mentality it just kind of keeps you small. And I think that that's
Mm,
where,
mm,
your connection to your own gut it matters. That childhood trauma, again, out of my pay grade here, but that
sure.
disconnects us from those instinctual signals because we learned something really early. That internal
Mm.
no or whatever. And, we kind of grow up overriding that signal and then we don't hear it anymore. And I think that that's very harmful for adults.
But like getting good at not hearing that voice anymore,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
hearing your
awful.
hearing your gut talk to you. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like you said, I mean, when we talk about friction, it's not just that people avoid it, but I think with what you're talking about, people don't recognize it as much anymore because it's become such a practice for you. I think it gets muted in the moment, but I think your body still registers it and I think your body still grapples with it. But I do think that you become real practiced at not feeling that gut feeling or hearing that voice in the moment. So you're just automatically agreeable and then you beat yourself up about it later.
Well, I'm glad you said that practiced, because I think that this is
Hmm.
something that we can change when we practice change. When we practice throwing a little friction in there, because look, if everyone likes you, again, maybe you're not being honest, and that's not a condemnation. And if it is, it's one that we're saying in the mirror. It's curiosity. It's like, when did we learn that honesty was dangerous? Or, when did we decide that clarity, it just costs too much? Because at some point it must have.
Well, yeah, at some point it did cost something. But like I think it's important. Like the goal of today isn't again, it's not to become just suddenly confrontational and roll up your sleeves and we're just ready to duke it out. And
Man goes
like don't
crazy
be out
over
there just
pineapple on pizza.
exactly. Don't be swinging your boundaries around at everybody. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, this definitely is not the moment to go blow everything up. Like I was joking earlier. I mean, I can feel my pendulum wanting to overswing here and go like, I'm gonna be sandpaper to everybody. Like, think about it a little
Don't do it.
smaller than that. Just start to
Right.
notice. Where do you override yourself? And where do you feel that small intentional no and you just kind of say yes anyway? And maybe
Mhm.
trying to practice, not to try to create friction, honestly, but to try to practice being honest.
To your point, like don't judge it. It's not about beating up on you either. It's about, sort of a curiosity to it. It's because there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not that. It's we did learn this at some time. It's something that it's an old narrative that we need to get rid of. And so you can also be today years old when you learn that friction is not necessarily unsafe either.
Yeah, because look, we always say failure's feedback. Friction, it's not failure. That's information. That feeling is the feedback. And if you're going to live intentionally and you're going to actually confirm what's real and own your part in it and be intentional, then you really can't afford to ignore that information.
Absolutely. And again, you don't have to become harsh. And you don't have to be rigid about it and be prickly and like just don't be like Bo and be sandpaper about everything. Don't do it. It's clarity. Clarity is kind. Like it's kind to you. It's kind to the people around you. That is the kindness. That's what everyone deserves from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's what we're boiling this down to is that, we're not talking this week about being less nice, creating more friction. We're talking about being more honest.
Absolutely, because again, the opposite of compliance is not aggression. It really is that alignment for yourself, and it feels different. Like that actual alignment, that does feel steady, and it feels appropriate, and it feels clean, and it feels like it's going to drive you to positivity. That's what we're looking for. Is that alignment.
That's the kind of thing that will change the nature of everything.
Before you go, just know it's time. Time to connect. Time to change the nature of everything. Find us at coinyourlife.com and don't stay stuck.